Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down. We continue on my catch-up post-COVID, and as I mentioned in my last video, there were things that I needed to go see that I wasn't able to because of quarantine. We got to do one of those yesterday, and we just talked about The Green Knight. Really dope Arthurian story, although different than you would expect an Arthurian story to be, but one that I really, really dig, and Dev Patel crushes. We've also talked about some stuff that I watched right as I got hit with being sick and wasn't able to talk about right away, and that's the last one we talked about. That, of course, is Masters of the Universe Revelation. Very divisive in the online community. I definitely had some thoughts on both sides. I understand a lot of things that are going on in and around that show. You want to know all my thoughts and feelings? Boom! You can check it out right up there. But now, we shift gears into something that I got caught up on because I had time while I was resting and recouping on the couch. This is a show that I wanted to watch right away. Knowing where this character comes from, and having been around when that was happening, like when this got announced, I was like, oh man. Like, one, I don't know how you let that get to Apple TV, but two, like, man, I really want to watch this show. And then, of course, it ends up being like the best show of the year last year. Everybody's raved about it. I didn't have Apple Plus. My brother finally got it, gave me like the family share access so that I could watch it. And while I had some time, I sat down, and oh my goodness, it's very difficult to have the type of praise this show has, and then for that to hit, and maybe not even hit, but maybe even like exceed what people were talking about. Man, is this a special and amazing show. What am I talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair? Take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-free, into, I know I'm like a year late, but Season 1 of Ted Lasso. This show is phenomenal, and I wished more things like this existed in the world. Huge shout-outs to creators Brandon Hunt, Joe Kelly, Bill Lawrence, and, of course, Sudekis himself. This was a character that existed in and around the Premier League when it joined NBC Sports. And the idea of having a football coach get confused and take a football job ends up being a soccer coach. Like, it was a really, really funny bit that they played from advertisements to little pieces that they would play during, like pregame or postgame. Like, it was just a wonderful way to bring the PL in a big bad way to America, and just something that was genius right from the get-go. So to get an entire show around that character, while the character is a little bit different than what it was when it was at NBC Sports, it is inherently the same thing. And it's one of these things that I give credit to Hunt, Kelly, Lawrence, and Sudekis. We don't get enough media and enough characters that are just genuinely, purely good. Like, there is not a bad bone in Ted Lasso's body. And that doesn't mean that Ted can't get angry or be serious. So when you first meet Ted Lasso, if you have not watched the show, you'll be in a spot where it's like, well, hey, man, that guy will never get mad. Like, how does he really function as a coach? But he does. He can go to all the different emotional ranges that people go through. And getting to watch him do that, and the way in which some of those emotional beats that aren't what we get to see Ted doing all the time hit. They hit harder, and they have a lot more weight to them when they show up in the show. But building a character that is purely good. Like, there is not a bad bone in Ted Lasso's body. All he wants to do is, create positive things for his players. I mean, one of the things that people don't like about him in the world of sports, per se, in the show, is that, like, it's not about winning and losing as much as it is about turning these young men into men. You know what I mean? And having a relationship with your team. And there's just not enough good characters like that in the world of media and in the world in general. I mean, we're in a place where I think in the real world there is such a combination of, like, good and bad and all these crazy things going on, specifically the last 2 years for, the world with the pandemic, and for Americans with what's been going on between the presidential race last year and all the different things around the pandemic and things of that nature. Like, this is the show you need in a time of legitimate turmoil in the world. It just made me smile ear to ear every single episode. I mean, the story is wonderful. I think it has a wonderful arc, not just for Lasso, but for every single character that is involved, whether it's the owner of the team or his assistant coach or the players. Like, every character gets full development over the course of the season and just has a wonderful overarching arc that, like, by the time you get to the end and, like, some of the truths about things that were actually going on that Ted was unaware of, light is shed on those things. It's one of those, like, you would expect Ted to respond one way, or a character in a show or a movie to respond one way, and the way that Ted Lasso responds is not the way that the characters in the show are afraid of, or what we would normally see in television or movies. And it's just nice to watch a show that brings so much positive energy and so many characters that have pure goodness in them. And, like, even the characters who are not good. I mean, you have a young star on the team who's all about himself, Jamie Tart. Yet there is a heart there, and there is goodness there. And the reason that we get to see it as an audience is because Ted sees it inside of the people inside the show. And even the rough, hard exteriors of characters like Roy Kent, who's a veteran and a leader on the team, but is very... You're able to break that character down and get inside and see the human being and the heart of that character, because Ted sees it in them. Like, it's so fascinating to watch all that stuff hit, and also be super tied into the sports story, like the story around the soccer team or football team, depending on where you come from. Like, that story around the club and what's going on in the personal lives of the players and the owners and the different people that work in the club and what's happening in the sports perspective. Like, the show does such a great job of developing and breaking into all these different characters and these different storylines. I mean, there's obviously Ted's A storyline, but you've got B, C, D storylines, and they're all working. Everybody is getting a share of the screen, a share of their story. Like, if you're not a main character, you're going to get an episode or two where you can really, like, dive into your character a little bit, and the stuff that they do and just where it takes the team and where we end up by the end. Like, you get to the end of the season, and it's a show that's a lot of character driven, character study type stuff, and not like, it's not a sports driven show, while the sport is certainly around everything. You get to the end of it, and because of the things that they have done in the sports realm, you get like a finale that hits in a way where, like, when you're at a movie and you're watching like a team of, like, you know, like go-getters and just gritty, like, grinded out type people who are underdogs, you get this wonderful, like, sport finish at the end of it that just hits all the ways that it needs to hit. And, you know, they find a way to just balance everything, right? Like, there's interesting storylines in Ted's story that, like, kind of show you that, like, being what Ted is all the time doesn't necessarily always work. And you can't have a show that's just dialed up to that place at all times. You need to be able to balance the emotions and the different things that are happening to create drama and strain and difficult situations, as well as all the positivity that is just constantly being funneled through the show. And I just think it was wonderful to watch the team balance that and how this show works on an emotional level. I mean, I was in tears, shocker, at the end of this thing. The key to ever winning over the Seaman's heart is to make the Seaman cry. And this show brings you there emotionally because you're just invested in everybody. And a lot of that has to do with the way the story is built and the creative team. The way that it's shot, I mean, the different direction in the way the show looks and functions, both, like I said, from personal and from sport, like, all that stuff works, engages, it pulls you in, and it just litters it with tons of characters that you end up getting really special performances from people. I mean, Jason Sudekis is insanely good in this show. Like, I've always liked Sudekis, but he is operating at a almost unmissable level. Like, I don't know how anybody takes the Emmy away from this guy while the show is on air. I don't know how anybody takes an Emmy away from the show while it's on air. I mean, the second season has started, and, like, the first few episodes in, while it's not the first season, like, it's still hitting, man. Like, it's still there, and I just the places that they go and the way they're exploring things and the characters in the story, like, oh, and Sudeikis is the guy who carries it. I mean, he's got a lot of support, but the show is carried by Sudekis, and the things that Lasso goes through in this first season really are the reason the show works as well as it does. And his performance is just... very rarely will you ever see a portrayal of a purely good person as good as what Sudekis does, especially when you get to see some of those personal moments. Like, he has personal issues going on outside of being the coach, and when you get to spend solo time with him, you get to see the breaks in that Ted Lasso facade and see more of the real person. While Ted that we get all the time is the real Ted, you also get to see other degrees of him that he doesn't show people, and the different scenarios that they put him in those places just allowed Sudekis to do some really, really special stuff. I mean, there's an episode where the team goes to karaoke, and he has a bit of a breakdown. One of the times I'm sobbing like a baby, and one of the most powerful, wonderful moments of the entire show. And it just sets something up for the end that allows the owner, who is being played here by Hannah Waddingham, who plays Rebecca Welton, the owner, and like the things that she has going on in her life, and the things that motivate her to do some stuff. Like, there are elements to this show where you could definitely tell the creators were fans of Major League, and the way that ultimately resolves and plays out just allowed for really cool things for Waddingham to do, and her chemistry with Sudekis is off the charts. I'm so fascinated just to see where those two characters go, and like little quirks between their relationship. Like, Ted always comes in and gives her these biscuits, and like she can't find where he does them, and when you find out where they're coming from, like, oh, there's just all these wonderful things. And Waddingham plays someone who is very easy to dislike, but also very easy to sympathize with. And I promise you, if you haven't watched the show, by the time you get to the end of the season, man, she'll have your heart. Like, she just, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Then you have Brandon Hunt, who plays Coach Beard. He's a great number 2 to Lasso inside of the sports stuff of the show. He's got some really interesting quirks. He's the one of the two that actually knows the sport of soccer. And it is one of those things where, like, I just really enjoyed the comedic elements that they bring in with Coach Beard. I mean, one, just the fact that his name is Coach Beard is phenomenal. But Hunt's performance is really, really quite strong. Jeremy Swift, who plays Higgins, is kind of like Rebecca's assistant, sort of. And where they take him, like, he is one of those peripheral, like, every time he shows up, there's probably some sort of a gag going on. And he's one of those characters, yet at the same time, by the end of the season, they find like a real genuine story and an emotional beat and a heart for Higgins. And how they utilize him and how he evolves as a character and where he fits inside the group was just wonderful stuff from Jeremy Swift. Then you have Brett Goldstein, who plays Roy Kent. That's the veteran on the team. Love it, man. He's so like I don't want, I'd rather grunt and like be angry all the time, but he's got this unbelievable heart at the center of it, and like he is a good leader and a good veteran. But the mesh of just what his general personality and attitude is to what he is on the inside is just a wonderful kind of duality to the character, and Goldstein does a wonderful job with it, and even more so in season 2. Oh man, they're doing some cool stuff with Roy Kent. When the season's over and we talk about it, I'm digging what they're doing with Kent, and Goldstein's having so much fun this season. But I really enjoyed his performance. Juno Temple, who plays Keely Jones, she's dating Jamie Tart. It's a really interesting character. Like, when you meet her right away, you're like, oh man, I wish we could spend more time with her. And they actually find ways to develop that character away from being Jamie Tart's girlfriend. And Juno Temple just does wonderful things. I love her relationship with Waddingham. The Keely-Rebecca friendship is one of my favorite things in the show. And again, it's just someone who brings a ton of positivity. And every time you need a lift or a boost in the show, Keely is usually the one to do that. And I thought she's just absolutely excellent. Then, of course, you have Phil Dunster, who's kind of one of your main antagonists most of the shows. He plays Jamie Tart. Jamie is very about himself, but there are deeper things and reasons behind why Jamie is the way Jamie is. And watching Lasso break that character down in particular to get to the root of a lot of the things that have made Jamie the way Jamie is becomes a redeemable character, becomes a character that you kind of root for. And then, the arc that they give Tart, both with his relationship with Keely and with the team, just really wonderful stuff. And I thought Dunster just really, really hit in that realm where you're asking him to kind of be this a-hole all the time. He captured that stuff really, really well, and I thought he did an excellent job. Toheeb Jamo, who plays Sam, he's one of the wingers on the team. wonderful. Like he's that young kid who needs that nurturing, who needs that father figure. The way Ted plays that for him makes it just a very easy character to root for, and the way he works inside of the team and where his story ultimately goes and how it plays specifically in with Jamie and with Roy. I loved the small nuanced performance that Jimmo gives you for Sam. And then I could go on and on. There's so many freaking characters in this show. You got these three fans that are always at the local club's bar. Love those three. It gives you a wonderful perspective from the fan base and how they see things. I also love the way that the fans interact with Lasso, specifically right after he's hired, and how like that all that awkward stuff of him getting there happens and how he progresses to win everybody over. Like, it's just great. Also, the owner of the bar who's always bartending. She's fantastic. Totally just feels like the right place. Some of the people who come in, Rebecca's ex, who's kind of like a villain, you would know him as Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Plays it perfectly. He's such a douche. You hate him so much. And how they utilize him to advance Rebecca's story, I thought was perfect. But the only other person I really want to call out is Nick Mohammed, who plays Nathan. Nathan is like the team manager, so he's the guy who does all the laundry, and he does all the stuff. And he's not a very confident, strong person. So Jamie Tart and his minions kind of pick on him a lot, and you'll see Roy defend him, and you create this just sympathetic, almost loser of a character for Nathan at the beginning, and to watch him evolve because of how Ted sees Nathan is just wonderful, and you see Muhammad kind of really get this confidence. That's now carried over to some very, very funny stuff for season 2. But I just loved everything that they did with Nathan, and I specifically love the group that they create with Nathan, Ted, Coach Beard, and Higgins. Like, that group of 4 is so much fun on screen, and the chemistry with all the actors here is just tremendous. Like, everybody plays off each other well. Even the side characters and extras that are normally in the background or maybe only get a beat here and there, like, they all bring something to it, and they just it feels like you're watching a real soccer team. And the performances in the show are just excellent. And like I said, it's just a story that's got a character that's so easy to root for. And what's like I said, outside of Rebecca's ex-husband, every character, good or bad, has qualities that make it easy to root for them, and those qualities are explored and brought to light because of Ted. And how that plays, and how you can have someone who's a American football coach coaching soccer in the UK be successful as a coach without knowing the sport really just kind of sheds light on, honestly, what a coach is supposed to be. Like what you look for in a coach when you have young kids learning a sport. That should carry over to all levels. Yes, winning is important, but the personal relationships and the coaching of men, I think, is something that's more important and is a very integral part of any coach. So to see it just put on display in the way that it is for Ted and how he's able to succeed without knowing the game, it's just something fun to watch, man. And it's a show that gives you everything. The emotions, you go up and down. It's a roller coaster. It's fun. It's funny. It's serious. It has really rich story ideas and really rich characters. And I just can't wait to see where else season 2 is going, man. Like I said, season 2 is off to a great start already. And I'm just pumped to see